All right. Well, welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for another installment of our Before the Snap program. I am Nathan Martin, the Youth and Education Coordinator here at the Hall. And normally you guys are used to seeing Jake, but he had a special meeting to be a part of today. So you're stuck with myself, and you'll see Jerry Shockey here in a little bit to host this program. And we're super excited about the guest that we have with us today from the Minnesota Vikings, Mr. Logan Johnson. But before we get to our guest, as always, just a couple of reminders and thank yous. Here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, our mission is to honor the heroes of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence together. And we really feel like doing this program for you as students, young professionals, wherever you may find yourself, we're fulfilling that mission. We're promoting the values the game teaches. We're celebrating the excellence that is, our colleague Logan with the Minnesota Vikings and his work that he does up there in that area. And we're happy to have you join us for this program. Our thank yous. We need to let our students that are watching the program know we really, really appreciate you guys joining in, viewing the program. But, we really get excited when you guys participate. So don't hesitate, show a little bit of courage. Go ahead and post your questions on the YouTube chat function. Let us know where you're watching the program from, where you attend school, and let us know what you want us to ask Logan on your behalf. Teachers, administrators, whoever it is, college professors, if you guys promoted this program to your students, thank you guys for doing that. And last but not least, I want to thank our special guest, Mr. Logan Johnson from the Minnesota Vikings, for joining us for this program. And kind of to give an intro to who he is and what he's about, I'm going to read his bio here. So Logan Johnson has been in community relations with the Minnesota Vikings for the past 6 seasons, including this past season, the 2021 season. He attended college at Upper Iowa University, where he played basketball and spent his time interning in a variety of areas in the athletic department. Upon graduation in 2014, he pursued a graduate degree in sport management at the University of Texas in Austin. After grad school, he accepted a rotational internship role with the Vikings, in which he was able to spend time with over 10 different departments throughout the organization in only a year's time. He joined the social impact team in the role of community relations coordinator in 2017 after the completion of his internship. In the last 4 seasons, he's helped lead community efforts as CR manager in the form of NFL cause initiatives, Salute to Service, Crucial Catch, My Cause, My Cleats, Walter Payton Man of the Year, Play 60, and connecting players to their passions in the community. With that, guys, I'm excited. Hopefully you're excited too, to welcome our special guest, Mr. Logan Johnson, for joining us here on Before the Snap. Logan, thank you for being a part of the program.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate being here, and thank you for the introduction. I think you covered a lot of things there. I can talk a little bit more about myself going back a little bit, just very quickly. But again, really, really appreciate you being here, and hopefully we do have some questions that kind of come in, because happy to go back and forth there. But yeah, I mean, kind of going back a little ways. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. Was interested in every different sport I could play at that time. So I kind of knew that I wanted to be involved with sports to some degree. When I went to Upper Iowa to play basketball there, I got involved on campus with a lot of different things. Ended up finally deciding on my major being sports administration, kind of my sophomore year, I would say. And that's when I kind of dove head first and jumping into any internship I could and any different experience that I could to get my feet wet there. And then once I graduated from Upper Iowa, I don't know how many people know, Upper Iowa is in a very small town in Iowa called Fayette, home of about 1,000 students. So very, very small school. In my mind, I wanted, when I was thinking of grad school, I wanted to do something a little bit different, go to a school that might have a little bit more opportunity. So I started applying to the biggest schools I could think of. And luckily enough, I was able to get accepted in the University of Texas, pursued my sport management master's degree there, got a lot of really cool experiences when I was down in Austin. Before applying and being lucky enough to get the rotational internship with the Vikings in 2016. So summer of 2016, kind of came back to the Midwest, moved to the Twin Cities, and did that year-long internship that you mentioned, rotating around to all sorts of different departments. That was really unique experience that I was able to work with a lot of different people in the organization, build a lot of relationships that way. And then after that, kind of caught on with the community relations team. And, I've been in the community relations space ever since. It's been awesome working in the community. I love being able to, kind of showcase the efforts that our players are doing, for their philanthropic efforts in the community. Not to mention, working with the NFL on all of the league initiatives that they do. So, you mentioned salute to service, crucial catch. I think a lot of people might recognize that from kind of the game day elements that you see there, but there's a whole lot that goes into that, beyond what you just see on the field. So really, really excited to be, in the role that I am. Team continues to grow, and a lot of opportunity up ahead. But again, really appreciate being here, and happy to answer any more questions on that.
Yeah, so I want to kind of start here with our questions as the students start thinking about what they want to ask you, Logan. And within your role, we think of the NFL season, 18 weeks. If you're lucky enough to make the playoffs, you got the postseason there. So what's the difference in what you're doing during the season, your, quote unquote, 9 to 5, your day-to-day work, compared to now in the off season? The draft is taking place this weekend. What's the difference between the in-season work and the off-season work that you do within your role?
Yeah, it's, I will say for our department, we are busier in season. And kind of like you said, I think a lot of people might look at that and just assume that you're only busy in season. And that's not the case for every department in the organization. There's a lot of different groups that actually get busier in the off season, then their workload might lighten up a little bit during the actual season. But for our case, we are kind of on that team schedule a little bit more. So I would say, as far as our community engagement, that really ramps up around training camp time. We start to be able to host different community groups out at training camp every single day, give them really unique experiences. And that's really when we get to know our players a lot, I would say. And then get to kind of hone in on what they're most interested in, and then build our community schedule kind of based off of that. I mean, we've been working on it throughout the off season, but as you get to know what our players gravitate towards a little bit more in the community, then we start building that a little bit more for our season. And then once the regular season starts, like you said, 18 weeks in the season now. We do what we call a Community Tuesday every off day for the players. So again, their off days are Tuesdays throughout the season. So we get community events set up for them each week. That could, be anything from a hospital visit to going to a Boys and Girls Club to having, a Special Olympics team come to our facility, whatever it may be. We do a lot of different things there and have multiple events on any given open day. So really, we try to take advantage of those, get our players involved as much as we possibly can. And then as we get later in the season, holidays are always a really busy time, but then later, especially if we're on that playoff run, we'll kind of taper back a little bit what we do, and then the off season comes. So that first month or so of the off season is a little bit lighter, I would say, but then we're talking about like budgets and things like that. And then, really it doesn't take long before we're right here into draft, and we're right here into planning for everything that takes place. So, contrary to popular belief, it is a year-round job. But I would say just like any profession, there is ebbs and flows in how busy you stay. So ours does, kind of rely on the season, but we stay busy throughout the off season as well.
Yeah, I can hear you there. I was actually talking to one of my brothers the other day. They were giving me a hard time. They're like, you work at the Hall of Fame. You only work one weekend out of the year anyway. You have enshrinement weekend. So I was like, listen, better than that. There's more work to go on. So we understand you got more work than what's going on during the season. Full disclosure, I'm a hoops fan. I like basketball. So when I was doing some research before we got started, to come up with some questions, I noticed that, you played the game in college. And I want to ask you, we both work in the football world now, unapologetically, with the Vikings and the Hall of Fame. But what lessons did you learn as a student athlete playing basketball at Upper Iowa that impact the way that you work today, that maybe if any of our students are student athletes, that they could kind of relate to?
I think there's a ton of things you can take away from being a student athlete. Time management, obviously hard work, effort, all of those kind of things. But I'd say most importantly, working with a team, that comes up a lot, of being able to adjust to different personalities, being able to work together well, no matter what. I mean, I would say that one of the big parts of my job now is just collaboration with different people, whether that's in my department, outside of my department, external partners, those internal. So, working on a team and being able to be effective in that space, I think is critical. And that's something that I would definitely take from that experience there. And yeah, I don't think, I have a lot of coworkers who have played different sports too, other than football. So clearly, any sort of those, any of those student athletes or experiences on a team kind of transcend the sport, so to speak. And it does not necessarily have to be specific to that. So the fact that you're a hoops guy, I don't think that that's limiting in any way, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I think what you were saying there, just the lessons you have to learn about being on a team with people that are different than you, learning to play your role. I mean, that's something you got to do now with the Vikings. You're on a team with people that are different than you, different strengths and weaknesses, and having to work together is something that all of our students can definitely relate to. I got to ask you here, Jake loves to throw out the old adage with our guests each week on Before the Snap. If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, that type of thing. I think that's what the adage is. But why does Logan Johnson love the work that he does in the community with the Minnesota Vikings?
I love it because I get to see the side of the players that I think a lot of people don't see. And that's just how much they truly do care about, people that may be less fortunate than what they are, or, those that may not have the same things that they do, but they know the platform that they have, and truly care about giving back. I mean, I have plenty of different stories of players who truly do not want a camera around when they're doing some sort of back effort or visiting with kids or anything like that. And it's tough because I respect that so much and I want to be cognizant of that, but at the same time it is I try to tell them like how important it is for others to see what they're doing, because that one player, especially, depending on the caliber of player, that may affect other guys in the locker room wanting to get involved. I mean, we're seeing that right now in our off-season programming. So I think that's the most rewarding thing for me, to kind of bring it back to your question, is being able to kind of see that impact that they're able to make and knowing how genuine it truly is from, most guys in the locker room.
Yeah. So I want to kind of continue to kind of look at the beginning of your career, because I think that's what relates to our students the most, probably, that are watching. They're sitting here like, man, I would love to have Logan's job working for an NFL team. That'd be amazing. So at the beginning of your career, is there maybe a mistake that you made early in your career, in college, that you look back now and you're like, man, if I could do that over again, I would want to do it differently, or I learned from this, decision that I made that set me up to have the success that I'm having currently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't say I regret anything about like the path that I took or anything like that, but clearly there's going to be mistakes made along the way, and plenty of them. I would say for me, looking back on it now, hindsight 2020, but looking back on it now, I would say that one mistake that I would say is kind of realizing in the moment, how valuable any experience is. I mean, I had a couple of jobs that I took with, either the Upper Iowa Athletic Department or the Texas Athletic Department that I didn't necessarily love. But at the time, my only thought was, how do I get out of this job? How do I move on to the next thing, that kind of thing. But I think realizing now that every experience is so valuable to learn from. You can take something positive away from any of the experiences that you have. So that's the one thing that I would say I wish I would have done a better job at that moment, is kind of recognize that and kind of make the most of it at the time.
Yeah, I think that's something that our students can relate to. Understanding that those situations we find ourselves in, there's something we can glean from all of those, good or bad, and then It can help us. We always laugh, when you're in this college space, try as many things as possible. Learn what you like, learn what you don't like, because a lot of times it's only a volunteer experience. It's a short internship experience. And it sounds like, you had some of those, especially when you were in college, working in the athletic department, helping out there. You're like, man, I hate this. I got to get out of this. But now, I don't want to do this for a career because you got that experience. So that really helps you out. Something that we try to always throw into these programs is our museum, because here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we mentioned, the mission here to honor the heroes of the game, to preserve the history of the game, promote the values it teaches, and to celebrate excellence together. So what we've got right now, we've got Jerry Shockey here from our team, Director of Youth and Education. He's live in the museum. We're going to throw it out there to him because I think he's in front of an interesting artifact related to the Minnesota Vikings, and maybe something that Logan got to be a part of.
Okay, thank you, Nathan and Logan. Thank you for connecting in with us here today. Students from all across the country that are tuning in from college universities across the country, we appreciate your time. I want to remind you again to make sure to get those questions submitted on YouTube. Make sure you put your name, your school that you attend, and then state your question so we can give a little shout out to your university. Personally, I'm a University of Mountain Union sport business grad. But it is interesting, especially having community relations. Number one, it's interesting to us because this is what we do at the Hall of Fame, essentially. We're youth education department. It's community relations, essentially, that we do here. But I think it's also interesting, too, because I know my alma mater at the University of Mountain Union was big on sales to get a job, in the sports industry. So to see a unique aspect in the community relations area, something different that you could go into. If you love kids, you love working with the community and those kind of things, this is an awesome job opportunity to highlight here today. So again, like Logan, thank you for being here. But I'm in our Pro Football Today gallery, and I'm in front of some pretty interesting shoes because something happened back in 2018 with the Minnesota Vikings when they might have been a divisional playoff round against the New Orleans Saints. Might have been down 24-23, 10 seconds left, no hope, and then guess what happens? The Minneapolis Miracle. And 61 yards, Stephon Diggs, touchdown, win in the books. As Logan and I were talking about earlier, might be the greatest moment in Vikings history. So, Logan, can you speak to that? Number one, what it meant to you as an employee, as a fan, but also like maybe in that week as you're doing programming after that, like the excitement in the community. Can you speak to those things?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. I would love to see that in person someday too, but so great choice. But the Minneapolis Miracle, I think, you did a good job of explaining it. I think most people remember what that play was like. In the moment, I actually, for anybody that's worked in sports understands that on a game day, you might be doing any number of items. So it's not that you get tickets to sit in the stands necessarily and watch all the time, which is in my mind, a good thing. I'd rather be running around doing something to kind of help out. But at the time, I was in one of our club areas and I was helping out with our foundation. They were running kind of an auction setup. And so I was helping them out. And I talked to a fan earlier in the day. He may have had a few adult beverages at that point, but I was talking to him earlier in the day. And I don't know, for some reason, we had some sort of connection. We were just talking about the game and I think the foundation auction. But when the miracle happened and Diggs scored the touchdown, that fan ran, I don't know, probably a good 30 yards across the club area and jumped into my arms as if we were best friends. So that's the one thing that I truly remember is it was hysteria in the stadium. It was crazy. Everybody was just in shock, but also celebrating like I've never seen before. And I think it was a lot of disbelief that, there wasn't going to be a flag on the play or anything like that. But once it kind of set in, it was so cool. And then one of the things that I truly remember is afterwards, for anybody that looks back on the play, everybody flooded the field and everything. But the rules at the time were the team had to go back and kick the extra point. And so they took forever to get everyone off the field from the celebration, everything like that, even though there was zeros on the clock. But Case Keenum was the quarterback for the Vikings at the time, and he started the Vikings SKOL chant. So for anybody that's familiar, they usually do that before the game, a few times during the game. But he started the SKOL chant himself, and that was the loudest SKOL chant that I've ever heard, probably ever will hear at US Bank Stadium. So that moment was unreal. It was unreal. And then afterwards, you know, I was hanging out with coworkers, and it was just, that was one of the main times that I remember thinking, hey, this is like the culmination of why I work in sports, you know, like all of that kind of coming together, and then realizing like the on-field success and kind of seeing that all happen, you know, affecting the business side too. I mean, it was just so unique and really cool to be a part of. And then to answer your final part, I know I'm getting long-winded on this, so I apologize, but you know, the next week for that was, I mean, it was prepping for the game against Philly, which did not go great, but the momentum throughout that entire week was wild. And that was the Super Bowl that Minnesota hosted. So we were in planning mode for the Super Bowl, because when you are in the conference championship game, all teams in the conference championship game have to basically get ready as if they are traveling or going to the Super Bowl. Us being a host city, it changed things a lot. So we were split up in a million different directions, and I was on like 3 or 4 different committees for like parking for the Super Bowl post game party, the entertainment for the Super Bowl post game party. So it's all of these different things the NFL has you do just to be ahead of everything. So I just remember it was a whirlwind, but it was so much fun, and the energy was just crazy in the city, and then I mean throughout Minnesota.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Logan. Appreciate it. Students, I'll be monitoring. I'll be heading back to our Studio B, if you will, and monitoring the YouTube live questions as you submit those and interject those. So I will see you guys again here shortly. Nathan, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. And you got a lot of questions when you get back there. So the students have been doing a great job. We'll get to your guys' questions as soon as Jerry gets back and gets settled again. But Logan, you know, you work in community relations. So question for you, with the experience you have, how do you see the industry or community relations changing or developing or growing in the near future? You know, you've been there a couple of years. You've kind of seen how it's been, how it was. I'm sure you've talked to people. Where do you see it heading in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably, you're going to get a different answer from most teams. I think everybody runs things a little bit differently. For specifically, I think just continuing to evolve and to push the envelope and do as much as we can. You know, our group always thinks about trying to maximize the impact that we make. So when you look at the Vikings platform and platform that our players have, I think it's mostly about just thinking like, how can we connect them with what they're passionate about, because that's going to maximize their impact. Then also as an organization, kind of what do we want to stand for and what are we passionate about and what do we want to truly get behind to push. So I think it's always doing things kind of trying to push the envelope in there and never being content. You know, this year, for example, I think one thing, and this isn't going to be quite as public facing, but one thing that our team is going to be focused on is employee engagement. So the last couple of years have been really tough for that, but our employee volunteerism is really important to us in getting our employees and staff involved with community efforts as well. I think that just kind of makes everything pretty cohesive, and you know, it's a kind of a culture boost, in my opinion, for the entire organization if we're kind of all aligned in that impact that we can make. So that's just an example of something that we're focused on this year. And I think each year you kind of pick and choose, like, what do we really want to get behind and what do we want to really back to make this better than we did the year before.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like naive of me. I never even thought of like that element within your role is kind of helping that culture within the organization, the internal culture, and providing those opportunities. But it makes sense. It makes sense that you guys would be doing that. And I think that's awesome. And I would agree with you that it can impact the culture in a big way. Another question for you is, in your bio, it mentioned that you went to the University of Texas. You got a master's there. You talked about that a little bit. why was that important for you to go get the master's degree? I know some students, they might be getting ready to graduate here in the next week or two, and they're trying to figure out like, oh, is the master's degree, do I pursue the full-time job? What would your advice be with that? I'm sure it's different for each person's scenario, but why was the master's degree important for you in your career?
Yeah, I'm kind of a unique answer on this because, you see in what you kind of went through in my bio, that I pursued a master's degree and then I was able to get an internship with the Vikings and I wouldn't, to be quite honest, I wouldn't have got that internship without that master's degree. That just the way that was set up, that particular internship, I would not have been able to get that without the degree that I had from Texas. With that said, I wouldn't necessarily encourage everybody to pursue a master's degree, especially in sport management, the way that I did. And I think it's different for everybody, right? But in my opinion, I think that you can build the experience on your resume without having that extra degree necessarily. I've hired for a few different positions now, and having that extra degree is definitely notable, but it's not a make or break for any particular candidate, is the way that I would describe it. Me personally, I value the relevant experience that they would have more so than that degree. And there's plenty of opportunities for relevant experience when you are attending, a school, when you're attending college, undergraduate, to get that experience, whether it's working and interning in athletic departments, working with nonprofits, volunteering, and I'm specifically talking about community relations here, but there are plenty of opportunities to get that relevant experience. I don't necessarily think a master's degree is the end all be all for working in sports at the next level. And I know my resume completely disputes that, but it's kind of what we talked about earlier. I learned from that. Now looking back on it, it worked out really, really well for me. I was in the right place at the right time, and I was lucky for how a lot of those things went. But just, if I was trying to give general advice, I wouldn't always go that graduate school route.
Yeah, I think you did a good job of explaining why it worked for you and was necessary for you in your career path. But the overall advice would be there's ways to do it without, having to go to get a grad degree and student loan debt or whatever, like there's ways you can get that experience without having to put yourself in that position. But, for some people, it is the right thing. I'm going to send it over to Jerry because I've been watching the YouTube chat over here to my right, and questions have been flying in. Some from students, some from just some fans that are watching. So I'm gonna let Jerry kind of just take over. I'm gonna sit back and listen to you guys chat a little bit while you get to answer all these student questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Nathan. And yeah, you weren't kidding. I came in here and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a lot to choose from here. This is awesome. So first question comes from Noah Vista, who is at IUPUI, Indiana University in Indianapolis. And he says, one thing I hope to learn more about is how I can get a job in the NFL. I look forward to listening to this every week. So what are some critical things you think as a student, maybe junior, senior, what do you think are those critical things they need to be really focusing on to get a job?
I'd say build your network and build your experiences up. So, get as many, like we talked about that a little bit, the relevant experiences of whatever field you want to be in, get as much experience in those as you possibly can. And then reach out to everybody that you can to pick their brain and to create that network, and understand, what it is they do, if that's something you're interested in. But all of that is continuing to build those relationships that are ultimately going to help you down the road. That would be my recommendation. The other thing I would say is, if NFL is your end goal, don't think that getting into another league or in sport is taking a step back. I think that is often a misconception, that you might get stuck in one league or another, depending on one of the first jobs you take. That's not at all the case. And there's definitely an avenue to get to where you want to go by kind of weaving through some of those different jobs.
No, I agree. You hit the nail on the head. For example, I've got a friend I graduated with from college. He started off with the Saints, went to the Browns, then went to the Chicago Fire in Major League Soccer, then went to the Oakland Raiders, then came back to the Cleveland Indians, and now he works for our for-profit arm, the Hall of Fame Village. So you're exactly right. You're spot on with that. Let's go to another one here. I'm looking down here at my screen. Trevor Hook says, Logan, big fan here. So I'm guessing he's talking about you, Logan. He must be a big fan. You got some groupies out here. So what would you say? And I think we kind of touched on this, but it might be something different than the Stephon Diggs cleats you saw there. What was the most rewarding / memorable moment you've had personally in your time with the Vikings?
Well, Trevor, thanks for the question. I'm a big fan of yours as well. I'll do a different answer than what I did for Diggs on field. I'll keep it to what we did for our community relations. For me, the most rewarding thing that we've ever done is actually a year-long program that we did with our Special Olympics Unified team. So for anybody that's not familiar, unified sports are athletes with and without disabilities are paired together to play on the same team to promote inclusion in the space. And we were able to take a unified Special Olympics team from Minnesota and kind of adopt them as our Vikings team throughout the season. And we did a lot of really cool things there. The first time that we had them out to our facility, they got a tour of everything, and then did kind of a signing day. So our general manager at the time, Rick Spielman, he was able to sign them to year-long contracts, got their draft hat, the custom jersey, everything like that. We did the photo shoot. So a lot of like really cool touches that we were able to put in there. And that program, they practice at our facility once a month throughout the season. And then it culminated with them traveling to Los Angeles to play the Chargers unified team that we had worked with to set up a similar kind of parallel program with the Chargers. For a lot of these athletes, it was their first time on an airplane. And we flew out to LA and we had a full weekend of experiences. And then we ended up playing our unified team took on the Chargers unified team before the Vikings played the Chargers that Sunday. So that whole weekend and really year-long experience really, really made an impact on me. And it's something that I'll never forget. Great question, Trevor.
Yeah, great question, Trevor. And we're going to go to one more, then I'll send it back to Nathan. Then maybe I've got a few more after that. But we've got Ian Eggert, who is from Allegheny College, and that is in Pennsylvania. And this is a very insightful question here. He asks, hey, Logan, when finding different community efforts to support, how do you decide? And I see he's got a little bit of an explanation to it. I'm trying to summarize this. How do you decide which organization is something you want to donate volunteer or efforts to, or whether it's just a philanthropic giving or something like that? How do you determine those things? What's the process to even just what organization you work with? Because you love to work with everyone, but you can't always work with everyone. So how do you go through that process when working with community organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a lot of different organizations, as you may imagine, that reach out and want to connect with the Vikings. Like you said, I would love to say yes to every nonprofit or every organization that reaches out, because ultimately a lot of them are doing amazing work. We have kind of different avenues. So one, we have a donation request page that's kind of I would say more of a passive support system of different nonprofits. So any nonprofit organization within the 5-state area can submit a donation request for a silent auction, for a fundraiser, anything like that, and then we will send them a signed item to help support their nonprofit. So that's very common for a lot of teams, but it's super important to be able to support organizations like that, and it truly does make a big impact on a lot of those items. And another way that we do that's kind of an elevated version of this is what we call our internal donations committee. So that kind of lives in our leadership space. But if we have an organization that's, let's say, hosting a gala or some sort of fundraising event, we can get information from them about what the event is and then kind of the levels that we could support at. We pass that up the chain. And then if it's something that our organization wants to get behind, we'll send a small donation that way to be able to support. So that's kind of another version. And then what I think he might be getting at is kind of that like player involvement, and how do we, how would we vet an organization based on getting players out to join them, that kind of thing. And really that takes a lot of collaboration, both internally with the organization, but also with our players. So if a player, I'll say this right now, if a player comes up to us and says they want to do X, Y, or Z in the community, almost always that's going to be a yes, because the goal of our job is to get our players involved in the community. So if one of them is coming up to us and asking for something specific, very, very few times will that be a no, because we will pretty much drop everything and make sure that we can get them involved. Otherwise, that is on our team to work with organizations, build those relationships with nonprofits, and see if it's a good fit for us to host one of those community Tuesdays that I referenced earlier, and go out there, provide player support. And then now, as I mentioned too, us focusing on employee engagement, employee support will kind of wrap into that as well. So hopefully I answered the question. I know that's kind of a few different ways of that, but that's definitely a good question.
No, thank you, Logan. I'll send it back to Nathan. Nathan, you see, we got 3 or 4 more queued up. So whenever you're ready to send it back here, we've got plenty more.
Yeah, awesome. And I love seeing that back and forth with our students. And students, thank you guys for being so active in the chat today and sending in questions. We'll definitely get back to you guys before we wrap up. But a couple questions for you here, Logan. For someone really any age, let's probably gear it towards our college students, because I think that's who the majority of our audience is. They're looking to get a job in sports, a career in sports. How can they make their resume stand out? Okay, the resume stood out. How can they stand out in an interview? You've probably done some hiring with interns and maybe even some full-time. What stands out to you in that position?
Experience, as much experience as you can possibly get on that resume. Like I said, relevant experience is great. But the more experience, the better. When I look at like a community, and I know that might be tough, telling that to a college student, but like we've talked about, there's a lot of different ways you can get involved in your university. I'm sure, whether that's certain committees to jump on, or internship experiences, or even one-off event experiences that you help volunteer for. So I think that's first and foremost the biggest thing. But another thing is what I talked about earlier about the networking. When you reach out to different people and provide, maybe it's sit down and have a chat with them about why you're interested in a certain role, or just ask them questions, that kind of thing. Your name's always going to jump to the top of that initial candidate pool, because we've talked to you before. Now, one caveat with that is, it's a lot easier said than done when reaching out to professionals in the industry. I know that not all of them are going to say yes to sitting down and having a conversation with you. I was in that same boat. I felt like I reached out to so many different people in the industry, and I very rarely got a yes. But it's maximizing that time when you do get a yes, and really showing your appreciation for that, and then understanding that that person is now a part of your network, and continuing to build off that, and to be persistent, not necessarily annoying, but persistent in trying to find those connections, I think is truly important, and can really make yourself stand out when it comes to an interview process.
So you use the buzzword there, the networking, the network that you're building. What are some tips, some tricks that you learned in undergrad and graduate school that you've even used now as a professional to continue building that network, maintaining that network, that our students can maybe employ when they're trying to start up a network?
I mean, be intentional about how you reach out. So, I am not great at LinkedIn. I need to do better at keeping up to date with it. With that said, I will be sure to follow up with it after this. So if anybody wants to reach out, please do. But when you reach out on LinkedIn and you indicate that you might have interest in doing a follow-up conversation or anything like that, be sure to follow up. You'd be amazed at the amount of times that I'll have somebody interested, or say that they're interested in reaching out and having a conversation. I'll say, great, email me here and we can set up a time to talk, and nobody emails me. So don't just say it, make sure that you follow through on that, and do that way. But then when you get that time in front of somebody, ask as many questions as you possibly can. I definitely appreciate somebody who will come in and ask a lot of questions. There's no dumb questions in my mind. I truly believe that. Ask as many possible questions as you can, because that does show your genuine interest in the role or in that industry. So I think those are two things. And again, it's not going to be the same for everybody. I always try my best to, if somebody does reach out, that I will follow up and have a conversation with them, because like I said, I was in that spot where I didn't get a whole lot of people agreeing to have a conversation with me. But I would just say, keep being persistent on that. And then when you do get your time in front of them, just make sure it's very clear that you're being intentional and planned about the questions you ask, and really expressing that interest.
Yeah, I would echo that and agree with what you were saying there. You know, we encourage students here at the Hall, through this program, through other careers programs that we do, you know, reach out, utilize a tool like LinkedIn. You know, you can look up the team media guys. There's 32 NFL teams, there's 30 NBA teams, 30 Major League Baseball teams. If you want to work in sports and maybe community relations is your thing, like Logan, I mean, all these teams have departments that are doing this. So you might reach out to over 100 plus professionals, and 2 of them respond, but value those 2 people and take advantage of that time that they're giving you. And that might help you, you know, down the road, get an internship or get a job. But that initial conversation can't be like, hey, you got a job for me. You know, have great questions, just be curious about the career. And I think that what Logan said there, we've put his LinkedIn, the link to his page in the comments in the chat. So make sure you guys go find that before the end of the program so that you can connect with him. Let him know you saw him on Before the Snap, ask questions, follow up. And he said he'll do his best to make sure he gets back to you guys if you'll do that here post program. Another question for me, Logan, then I'll send it back to Jerry to get some more student questions. With the NFL draft happening, you know, last night I stayed up late. Full honesty, man, I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. So I had to see what we did at 22 and 28. I know you're sitting there with the Vikings, the emblem on, but I'm a Packers fan. So I was like curious, but I know you guys were there at the end of the first round. You made a pick with Lewis Seen out of Georgia. I'm curious, in your role working in community relations, how soon are you guys working with this new class of rookies that will be completed by the end of the weekend? You know, is there a set standard and a policy of how you're getting these guys engaged in the community? Or do you kind of just wait for them to come up and say, hey, I'm curious and what I can do in the area? How's that work?
Yeah, well, and I do want to add to, you know, I mentioned that I grew up in Wisconsin, so I can relate to Packer fans, and hopefully you're feeling okay, even though they didn't draft a wide receiver, but that's for another day. You know, we work through our player development director a lot. He does a phenomenal job with everything onboarding for new players. So he runs what we call our rookie success program. And I'm almost positive every team in the league does something similar to this, but all of our rookie class, you know, drafted or undrafted, will be a part of this program, and they go through a ton of different things, whether it's, you know, career advice, you know, managing your money, that sort of thing. There's a lot of different areas they cover. But recently, we have asked to be involved from a community relations standpoint. And basically we want to provide a community event for all of the rookies to attend. And make sure that they get involved with something. And we'll always make it something that is, you know, fairly easy and going to be fun for them to be involved with. So we try to do that when we can. I wouldn't say there's any parameters on when we can reach out to them. I'm going to be cognizant of their time. I mean, you know, the one thing working in community relations, we have a lot of asks for players. Not all of them are going to be committed to giving back in the community. And truthfully, that's okay. It's just kind of recognizing who that is and how to work with them. I mean, because they're football players first, right? Like that is what they're here to do. And we need to be respectful of that. So if that's not something that's a great fit, then we'll make sure to move on from that. But when it comes to a rookie class, we want to kind of get off on the right foot with them and make sure that we're, you know, not overly eager, but we can get them involved soon enough through the proper channels, working through our rookie success program. So we found that to be successful. And, you know, I would say that really comes back to building a relationship with our player development director there, because if we didn't have the relationship that we had with him, he wouldn't have the trust in us to put on a community event for the rookie class and to be able to bring them there. So it really works out well. And going back to how important those relationships are, I would say that kind of stems from that.
Yeah, I love hearing that you guys are working and different departments coming together to really put the best product out there for the players give them the most opportunities, put the best product out there for the Minnesota Vikings organization. That's cool that you guys are able to work like that together and get those young rookie players involved pretty early. I'm going to send over to Jerry to get some more student questions in before we wrap up. As always, if we don't get to your guys' question today, we've given you the information how to connect with Logan, so feel free to follow up if we don't get to your question and let him know, hey, I wanted to ask him before the snap, but these guys kept asking their own questions. Here's my question. But Jerry, let's get some more student questions in here before we got to finish the program up.
Yeah, I think we can probably maybe get to 4 or 5 more because we got a bunch in here. So we'll see how we do. But students, I want to remind you guys again that Logan gave you a personal invitation to reach out to him. What an amazing opportunity is to get your network built and start building that. We not too long ago just got an email from a student that said they tuned into Amanda Carlo's program. Logan, you probably know Amanda. She does community relations with the Kansas City Chiefs, and they tuned in, reached out to Amanda afterwards, ended up interviewing for a job. They got it, and they credited this program to opening that door for them to get a job in the industry. So again, you have an open invitation from someone to say, reach out to me. Students, reach out to them, take advantage of it. So question we have now, this is really cool because we do have some, it's not just college students here and young professionals. We have a school every year that every program tunes in. They always have, it's an elementary school and it's Crowlin Elementary, and it's the student's name's Levi. And he asked, what inspired you to get into community relations?
Great question, Levi. The more I worked after that year-long internship where I kind of rotated around to every department, I gravitated towards community because of, a few reasons, but mostly because of, at the core of it, it's giving back to those who don't have the opportunities that what we would have, and especially what our players have. So I think it's kind of being that vehicle to help provide those different opportunities to them and those special experiences. It can be anything from, like we said, a program that we ran with the Special Olympics, or simply having a guest on the field to be there to watch pregame warmups. Those moments, you really can't replicate those. And so the more I was in community relations, I saw that more and more and realized how unique and special it was to have that be your day to day. So that's what inspired me to get into community relations, and very grateful that I'm in this realm.
Thank you very much, and let's keep it moving here. I'm looking at Alexander Tuttle, and I think Alex is tuned in for a number of these from University of Iowa. And Alex, you touched on this a little bit, Logan. What kind of nonprofit organizations or just community organizations do you guys partner with typically?
It varies, and we've talked about it a little bit, but it kind of depends on the appetite and the passion from the player. But if we're working with the organization through the Vikings, it really depends. It's going to be different organizations that are prominent in the Twin Cities, but also kind of those national organizations that you recognize, Boys and Girls Club, American Cancer Society, things like that. But then you find those local organizations like United Heroes League. That's a great military organization near us, and they're doing such great work. We really try to work with them as much as we can when it comes to our military engagement. And so I think just, it's always going to vary, and you really want to spread the love, but then you start to realize what organizations, are making the biggest impact, or simply what organizations are the best to work with. I'm sure everybody has examples of somebody that's not the easiest to work with for one way or another. That matters when you're working with different nonprofits, and if they're able to, to pick up your phone call and maybe turn an event quickly, that definitely matters when working with us too. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but I would say, it starts at the level of impact that we can make, all the way down to the relationships that we have one-on-one with those people leading the organizations.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Logan. Let's go to a few more here. Matthew Boykin, he says, hey, Logan, my name is Matthew Boykin, a Coastal Carolina University alumni. And he just had a question about the rotational internship. When did you start to apply? Was that during graduate school, after? How'd that work out?
Yeah, the rotational internship was really unique. I started applying that application process felt like it took forever, but I applied, I feel like early December. And I think I actually got the job, or was told that I got the job in maybe late April. So it took a long time. But that was when I was in grad school. And, that program was pretty unique to the Vikings, and we actually don't run that exact program anymore. I will say we do a lot of associate positions, though. Those are essentially internships, and those are posted every year, probably around like February, March. But, so there's always opportunity out there. That rotational internship was pretty unique. And unfortunately, the program, like I said, is not running anymore. But yeah, I had a very interesting interview process, I would say, going through that.
Thank you very much. And we've got Ariana Firk from Dordt University. And this is kind of an interesting one. Now, it might deal a little bit more PR, but you're in the public a lot. You're working with the public a lot. And Ariana asks, I've heard all media is good media, how do you feel about that? And how do you handle unsatisfactory situations?
Talk to our PR team. No,
Perfect.
No, I mean, that's going to happen no matter what. When for us, thankfully in the community relations realm, I mean, you'd like to think that most of the things that we're promoting on social media or anything else is going to be received fairly well. I mean, obviously that's not always the case. I mean, we've had situations when a season's not going well and we post about a community event, and all of the comments on Twitter will be, maybe they should spend time on the practice field and not in the community. So, you're going to have that kind of stuff. And I think you just learn to tune it out a little bit. If you're doing your job to the best of your ability, and, in our case, working with our players and what they want to do, and you are creating a positive impact. I'm talking obviously specifically just for community relations here, but I'm not going to sit there and question the things that we're doing or the media that we have for that, because some fans can never be satisfied, as a lot of us, I'm sure, know.
Yeah, so I agreed. We work obviously a lot with the public, and I feel what you're saying. And as you said, if in doubt, talk to our PR team. So, two more here. We got a fifth grade class, Ms. John's class, fifth grade class. Would like to know if you have any funny locker room stories. Any behind the scenes stories.
Wow. Funny locker room stories. I don't know. That's tough. That really put me on the spot with that one. I don't know. It's tough because we are down there, not necessarily in the locker room, but around the locker room and around the players a decent amount. I wouldn't say that I have any necessarily like funny stories. I would say most of the guys there that are in the locker room they're really just really great guys that are able to, when you're able to get to know them a little bit more. Again, I've talked about relationships a lot here, but you're able to kind of build those more and more. And I think even those interactions that are not work related are just as important as anything else. So I guess one, not necessarily that funny story, but we were talking to Harrison Phillips. So anybody who doesn't know, Harrison Phillips recently signed with the Vikings, defensive tackle, came from Buffalo. And he's phenomenal. The first thing he wanted to do was get involved in the community. He's so outgoing, so personable. So he stands out a little bit from some of the other guys, but he recently asked if he could have a desk up in our cube space with myself and my colleague. And I actually don't think he was joking. He wants a nameplate and a desk to sit up there with us so he can plan out his community events every week with us, which honestly, with the amount of community events that he's been doing, he may have earned himself a desk up there, but I think we have to unfortunately tell him no. But it's stuff like that. Again, just like building the relationships, more and more of that is going to happen. And it's really cool to see those guys who really, really, truly want to get involved and give back.
Don't you love those guys too? I mean, we know that because we do probably just in our department alone, probably work with 25, 35 somewhere each year of our Hall of Famers. And some of our favorites, all of them are my favorites, but if I was to say who we work very closely with, a lot of them are Vikings Hall of Famers. We probably do 2 or 3 programs a year with John Randall alone, just from our youth football camps and stuff like that. So you love those guys that that are very passionate. They're ready to do, like anytime you call them, like, yeah, let's do it. I know this is, and it comes back to, like you said, knowing what they're passionate about, and knowing those things. So it's easier to ask when it's something that's near and dear to them or their foundation that they have and those things. So I've got one more question to close things out here, and then we'll send it back to Nathan. But I think this one's going to be pretty special to you because this is it says, "Hi, Logan, Megan McKella, Scott Hughes here, Upper Iowa student currently, your alma mater, and very interested in your journey. Where do you see yourself in, say, 10 years?" What an awesome question.
Great question from Michael Scott Hughes there. That's tough. And shout out to the Peacocks. That is the mascot for Upper Iowa, just so everybody knows. 10 years, I would love to stay in community relations. I do really love the role, and I love what we're able to accomplish in this space. I don't necessarily want to put any limitations on, next 10 years or anything like that, but because I truly believe you should never, close any doors, especially for everybody here. Anybody that's listening that's a college student, definitely stay open-minded about certain opportunities. On paper might not look like something that you necessarily want to do. Once you learn a little bit more about it, it could be the perfect job for you. So I definitely don't want to close any doors there, but I would love to stay in community relations and maybe in a leadership role with the CR team. I think that having that the platform that we do to be able to give back, create positive impact, something that I want to stay involved in. So really excited to kind of stay in that realm. And I know that would be not as specific as far as like what I want to do exactly 10 years from now. But that's probably the most accurate answer that I can give.
Perfect. I think that was a great question to end this with our YouTube Live. Great job, students. Appreciate all your great question you had here today. And Nathan, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, for running through all those questions. If you didn't get to the alma mater, I was going to make sure that we got that in there. So I'm glad you got that question in there.
Man. I got your back.
I didn't know Upper Iowa, though, the Peacocks. That's a pretty unique mascot.
Peacocks. I don't know if that's going to strike fear in anyone, but, from a football perspective.
St. Peter's made their March
Madness. It's a good question.
Yeah, they made their run, and they're the Peacocks. So, Logan,
they helped put the Peacocks on the map a little bit, I think.
They did. So. Yeah. What was it? Hashtag strut up. But I got one more question for you to kind of wrap things up. And this is kind of just very open-ended. You might have already touched on what you want to say here. You might have something completely different that you read or heard in a podcast or something. If you had to leave us with one piece of advice for our students, really all ages, young professionals that maybe are watching this program, what's that one piece of advice you want to leave everyone with to kind of wrap up this installment of Before the Snap?
Good question. I'll say two, I guess. I'll cop out and I'll just say two quick pieces. I would say never be afraid to ask questions. Keep asking questions always. We hit on that a little bit. And then, always bring positive energy is one thing that I would say. I think that's something that I've learned more and more rubs off on people, whether that's in an office setting, at an event, anything like that. That is truly contagious, being around that. And you learn that you like being around people that are going to be more positive than otherwise. So I would say those two things, they sound very, very simple, but it's not quite as simple once you're sitting down, like focusing on it and like, well, did I approach that with the best attitude? Or could I have left that meeting asking a few more questions and, honing in on that understanding. So I think those are two things that I would say.
I love it. Ask questions, stay curious, and be positive. That's something that can apply to really any of our students, regardless of the age that they're at, any of our viewers, regardless if they're in the sports industry or not. Ask questions and stay positive. That's a great piece of advice. And guys, with that, we're going to wrap up this installment, this episode of Before the Snap. I want to thank Logan Johnson from the Minnesota Vikings, working in community relations, for being a part of the program. Really appreciate everything you had to say to our viewers and answering all those questions from our students. So Logan, thank you so much, man. And kind of wrap things up, guys. Make sure you're tuning in to everything else we got coming here from the Pro Football Hall of Fame on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you find yourself. Tune into our stuff. Tune into what the Vikings are putting out there. We'll give a little plug with Logan and his team up north there. Tune into what they're putting out there. We've got one more episode of Before the Snap next week we'll have Jay Romig from the New Orleans Saints that'll be part of the program. So tune in for our last episode of the year before the snap. But once again, Logan, thank you so much for being a part of the program.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you having me. And, thanks a lot for all the questions too. And really, truly, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if anybody does have any interest. Would be happy to connect. So again, thank you very much and really appreciate it.
Awesome. So guys, with that, we'll wrap this program and hopefully we'll see you guys next week.